Father, in everything we do, we want to worship you and give you grateful thanks and joy that you are in control. That we don't have to be concerned about what's going to happen to this world, and it's concerning. We don't have to be concerned about the horrible things that may come upon us, that will come upon us, according to the book of Revelation. But you're in charge, and you have a reason, and the ultimate glory of all that is Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior coming back to earth. So, Father, no matter what we're going through, we pray for your wisdom. We pray for your guidance. We pray for your love, unconditional love in these unusual circumstances. And we pray for your Holy Spirit to guide us in everything that you would have us learn about you, learn from your word, and do for you and for the kingdom. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. In everything, every night, we like to review. So we're going to begin with that review tonight of what we've talked about over the last couple weeks. Anyway, what we've talked about, and our focus has been the signs of the times during COVID. What has changed? Has anything changed prophetically to be leading us towards the last days? And that's really what we've been focusing on. So we talked about government subjugation, how we're surrendering our constitutional rights, how it's all for the common good, that which we like to help other people. But again, that term common good is often used as in a communist term, where it's all for the common good. So we have to be careful. Economic crisis. Now, we're going to talk later about the World Economic Forum, but I found interesting after we talked about that in January of next year, they're meeting in Davos, Switzerland, with 3,000 attendees, and the theme is stakeholders for a cohesive and sustainable world. Now, sustainable is a buzz phrase that we're going to hear in a little while, but that's a buzz phrase for the one world government. At the last conference they had, where they came up with the things that we'll see later in the PowerPoint, they had all the head people. They had the head of the European Union, the Secretary General of the United Nations. Prince Charles was even there. But they had all the major players in the world at the last one and came up with the recommendations that you're going to see. So you can imagine what the 2021 recommendations are going to be. We talked in depth about the mark of the beast and how we're not there yet. And the mark of the beast is not on the horizon, and it's not the COVID vaccine, but it's a step towards what we're going to see. Our vaccine, or where we're going, is heading right towards the technology for the mark of the beast. Then we talked about attitudes. Now, Z brought up a good thing after class. The main passage we used was from 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 5. Well, we talked about all the attitudes of people. That passage is written to Christians. So when we're talking about the attitude of people, we're probably talking about the attitude of Christians in the last day. And it was horrible. But it was written to Christians, so maybe he was warning us about people in general, but it makes me wonder if it was warning about Christians who have changed their attitude about Christ and have a different attitude, and we're seeing it today. A lot of division in the church. If you want to look at attitudes, you can look at Romans 1, and you can see how the world has a change of attitude and how God turned them over to the lusts of the flesh and other things that they were doing wrong. Whereas 2 Timothy is more for the church. Then we talked about lawlessness. Now, this is where I want Z to talk in just a minute, but I found this interesting that came up just this week. The City Council of Columbus, Ohio is considering legislation to screen police officers for any connection to hate groups, as defined by the Southern Poverty Law Council. I think that's what it is. Anyway, so what they're going to do is they're going to screen the police officers for hate if they belong to any hate groups. According to the Southern Poverty Law Firm, or law office, what are hate groups? Christians. They have 1,100 people on their list. In 2012, when the Family Research Council, thank you. When the Family Research Council was attacked and people were shot, the Southern Poverty Law Center came out and said that that was a hate group. They're not surprised that happened because that solid Christian organization is a hate group. So they have 1,100 names on their hate group list. So if anybody's donated, a police officer's donated to any of those Christian groups that are on their list, they'll be blackballed. You see how the slippery slope is happening, persecution of the church. So what we really talked about last week, what we ended with, was racism. And not racism, what's going on in our culture. We really didn't talk too much about racism. We talked about Antifa and we talked about Black Lives Matter. It was right at the end of class, and I wanted to look to Z and say, Z, what are your thoughts? But I didn't want to put him on the spot. Now, I know Z well enough to know that he probably wouldn't have minded being put on the spot. But I asked him if tonight he'd take a few of the comments that we made, because he made some good comments to me, and come up and just talk for a few minutes. Now, he's prepared to talk for hours because he brought a stack this big. And if you know Z, he could. But we're gonna include him in a lot of the discussion next week. So tonight's just kind of an overview. I want him to share when we talked about Black Lives Matters and their agenda. Z had some comments that he made to me.
Well, Black Lives Matter is not a group that was created by black folks. It's not run by. You got Antifa, you got communist groups, you got white liberals, you got a lot of anti-groups. Now, it's got a black face, and they did put 2 black lesbian women, but it's not about black lives. It's not about stopping abortion. You know, it's not about, they're against male and female marriages. They're pushing equal rights. Black folks are offended when you say civil rights and equal rights are the same. They're not. 2 different things completely. But they're always trying to blend those 2 as one when they're not. Martin Luther King made a distinction when he got rid of one of the guys that was a homosexual in his group. And he's into homosexuality, sodomy and all that kind of stuff. He separated himself from that. But people try to tell you that equal rights and civil rights are the same. No. My color, civil rights, equal rights are not the same. So that's something. When you see people in the media, you don't have any black politician or anybody that's on television that will speak against equal rights. They will always blend civil rights and equal rights together on the media. Otherwise, you won't be on the media. They want the passive black to be on television. The black that's the conservative black is not on TV, really talking. They don't want that. Now, I'm not no Larry Elder fan or no Clarence Thomas. No, because they got black on black hate, those 2. But I'm talking about conservative blacks that believe in the Bible and blacks that believe in jobs. Now, blacks don't want to be run down by policemen. You know, policemen usually have to protect and serve. Now, if you're on a football team and you got players that's disruptive, you remove them. So now, in the police force, you want black on black crime, you want blacks to snitch, then why don't the cops snitch on each other? That's bad. That's a problem. So we have a problem with that. So now, even myself, believe me, I've dealt with policemen. I'm not saying all policemen are bad. But they do, when I'm driving somewhere, I'm always watching my rearview mirror. And they do turn around and they do follow me. And they follow me for a couple hours to see if everything is right on my registration. It just happened this weekend. I was driving and one made a complete U-turn on the street and came right behind me and followed me for a couple hours just before I give my tax done. I've had them follow me at nighttime with the lights off, shouting my movements. You know, so this thing's real. I had some that my mother had to have that talk with me before I came here. Because I'm from California, so I'm thinking I got all my rights and I can do whatever I want to do. She said, when you go there, don't confront the police. You know, don't confront. But they pulled me over, tried to provoke me. I didn't fall for it. But my mother had that talk with me. So those situations are taking place. You know, we just need to. So I'll just bring up some cases. So what took place when it got to the point where black folks got completely upset, and when you seen George Floyd get wiped out, there was nothing he did wrong, other than whatever bill that he was trying to pass in the store. But he complied to everything. People always say comply. He did everything right. He complied. He still was killed. And one of the reasons why Antifa and those other radical groups are with Black Lives Matter is because normally when black people get injustice, the white Christian church is silent. So the person that embraces them is communist people, radical people. Black folks are looking for a change. And if those people are embracing them, then what happened in South Africa? Some of the communist groups or whatever wanted support. They wanted to change. Blacks want to change here in America. So the situation what I'm saying, what happened that week that caused all that situation, you remember Amy Cooper, the woman in New York? She said, there's a black man I'm going to call the police. She's a bird watcher. He was a bird watcher. I'm going to call the police. Now, you know, if the police would have showed up, what was going to happen to that guy? That woman made that statement. Because when she made that statement, black folks recalled Susan Smith in Carolina. She drove her kids into a lake and claimed that a black person did that. And they was jacking up black folks all around the place. So, instant recall, blacks thought of that moment when that woman made that statement. So all those things started taking place, and same people, black folks said, wait a minute, I'm sleeping in my bed, I get shot. I'm not getting any justice. I'm complying, I'm not getting any justice. This woman makes this accusation against me. You heard, there's all these accusations that a woman, when black men are at the dormitory at colleges, and a woman will say, he don't belong here, call the police. Police jacked the guy up. He lived there. He's living on dorm. That happened several incidents. Black folks are aware of this type of stuff. So at this point, they say, we got nothing to lose. When you put people in a situation where they got nothing to lose, then they come down and they protest and they mad as heck. And this black folks right now are not going to be like John Lewis in the 60s and so on. They're not going to let nobody put the water hose on them or the dogs or anything bad. They're going to fight back. They're going to be aggressive if you're going to do injustice and keep this injustice. Watch the difference that you see on black folks that's on television, on the media. We have blacks that's in the media that gets a position and they don't have no feelings towards them. Their situation is good. Our situation is bad. The schools are pathetic.
Before you ask your question, though, I just want to say what you said to me last week, which was very insightful. And you said, you know, I agree that we need social change. I agree that we need some change, some reinforcement in the police officers. But all these other things that they stand for that we shared last week from the website, he said, I don't agree with that. That's a liberal agenda. But these people are standing up for blacks, and they're getting attention. So those of us you didn't say this, but I'm basically guessing that those of us who aren't able to stand up, aren't able to get attention, that's important because they're getting the voice heard for people like Z.
And I'm saying, when you watch those groups that's protesting, watch people who put out those pallets. They putting out pallets for those guys to throw stones. That's organized. That's an organized situation. When you watch those people doing that spray painting, it's not necessarily when black folks are involved, but they're not the one that initiate that stuff all the time.
Right.
When you watch that house that took place in St. Louis, those guys lost that guy's house. There's a black guy walking, and the white guy's getting ready to confront the family with the gun. The black guy's trying to pull him away. Let's not get them started. We're going through this area. So blacks are involved. I'm not saying that blacks are not innocent. I'm just saying they're involved. They're not the ones that always initiating this type of stuff. Coming out with all this spray paint and all this kind of stuff. Look at the people that's doing it. When you look at that situation that took place with CNN at the CNN building, there was a white guy that picked up the chair and it was breaking down the windows and slamming. The police was standing there. Now, black folks would follow suit, but the one that initiated, so that group has been infiltrated. There's no Malcolm X and no Martin Luther King that's speaking right now. People was listening. Farrakhan was out there, but he's out. He's too far. He's too far extreme. He's speaking. He's bringing up issues, but he's too far out. A lot of ministers, some ministers, not Robert Sharp, not Sharp. I'm talking real ministers. You had real ministers that were dealing with issues and getting people, setting up programs for schooling and for education and learning who you are in the Bible. Because see, one thing dealing with racism, you don't hear people teach the black presence in the Bible. We're there, but it's not really being taught. It's not really been taught. We didn't just pop up after 1865. That's all I got to learn when I was in school. Mm-hmm. 1865. After that, there's nothing prior to that. Basically, I'm taught. And I heard by Harry Tubman and Frederick Douglass, and a little bit about George Washington Carver. That's it. And George Washington Carver was the one that helped end the Dust Bowl. He told them to rotate the crops. In there. But there's no single black leader that's speaking for blacks right now.
Well, thank you, Z, for sharing your thoughts with us. We appreciate that. And we're looking forward to you participating a little bit next week so we can hear some more of those things. I will add a couple of things. One is that I listened to a lot of information this week and read a lot of things because I wanted to know more about this from a different perspective. And learned some interesting statistics. One is that 15% of the people who pass the New Jersey Turnpike are black. And of those 15%, there are 42 stops. 42% of them are stopped for traffic incidents, and 73% of them are arrested. Now, that's, and apparently double the people on that turnpike that are white, double the people than blacks have drugs on them, but they don't get arrested. So there is definitely a disparity in this country in the way things are happening. I will tell you all, I would suggest that you, I listened to a man this week who is, I don't even have his credentials. He used to be pastor of a black church, and then he decided, what am I doing speaking to my own people? So he went to become pastor of a white church in Texas, a Baptist church, and now he's the head of director of theology at a university in Zambia. Anyway, his name is Vodie, Voddie, Bachman, Bauchman, I think. And the video, which he did with one of the radio commentators, is called Poisonous Ideologies. And it's really very good, very good. There's a lot of other good ones out there, black and white, that are giving some good YouTube information, history and other things. So, it's important for us to be educated. That's why we're going to do a class on it next week. This is a problem in our country, and it certainly is a problem with lawlessness, and we need to understand the problem. And more specifically, we need to understand the answer, which of course is Jesus Christ. So anyway, we talked about lawlessness last week, and that's where we ended up, so I wanted Z to say a few words. Of course, our theme all along has been to the book of Sardis, to the church at Sardis, which is wake up. And we'll talk more about that as we go on. So that's just a little bit in review. I wanted to share this with you because I see this is where we are. In Isaiah 5:20, it says, woe to those who call evil good and good evil. That's where we are today. But they put it a little bit more succinctly. They said, first we overlook evil. Think about that. In the days of homosexuality, we just kind of overlooked it. And then we permitted it. Why shouldn't they have the same things that we have? Why shouldn't they be able to love each other? Then we legalized it. Well, why shouldn't they be able to be married? And then we promoted it. It's on all the TV shows, homosexuality. Sex is on a lot of TV shows. And then we celebrate it. The former Attorney General required all the people in his office, in his DOJ, the Department of Justice, to take sensitivity training in support of gays and lesbians. We know that our businesses, many businesses require it also. So we celebrate it. They even had to, by the way, go to parades in order to keep their jobs at the DOJ. Then we persecute those who still call it evil. And who calls homosexuality evil? Christians, the Bible. The Bible says it's wrong. So they'll be coming after us. We've already fallen down this slope. And it's not just homosexuality. It's anything that goes against God's word. We will stand on the truth of God's word. At least in this group we will stand on the truth of God's word. And as Christians, we should all stand on the truth of God's word. That means persecution's coming, and vastly coming. Now, let's move forward. Let's talk about other things that we have seen that have changed, that started maybe a while ago, but have changed during COVID. And one is voting by mail. Now, we've always had voting by mail, absentee ballots, no problem there. But what we're seeing now, the Public Interest Legal Foundation recently reached a settlement with Allegheny County in Pennsylvania, including Pittsburgh, to clean up voter rolls, which included some 1,600 dead registered voters, 7,500 duplicate voter registrations, and all the other information. Now, these are people who voted, even though they were dead, and even though they were duplicate registrations. That's why they're cleaning them up, because of all the fraud that was going on. Now, this is passed. Also, during the last election, there were 1,285 proven cases of fraud with 1,100 convictions. We have an example there of a judge of elections who was paid by a Democrat to go in and in 3 separate primaries. He accepted the bribes and charged with the election fraud for stuffing the ballots. That's what we've seen. We know that election fraud is there. Some people say it's not there very much. Maybe it's not. But when you have vote by mail only, which is what many states are talking about, then you open the door for much greater fraud that can take place. My son's been out of our house for 14 years. And until he moved back to Nebraska recently and re-registered to vote, I could have gone in and signed his name and later than I did mine and voted for him. So there's a lot of potential for fraud out there. But vote by mail is even worse, because then what can happen is they can have things sent to people's homes that they know can't fill them out or aren't interested in voting, and they can call people of their same persuasion and say, can we take your ballots? So you sign it and we'll vote for you. I mean, there's a lot of fraud potential that's out there, and it's all designed by certain groups to get their candidate in. So now with COVID, they've got the perfect cover. Look at what happened in the spring elections. A lot of them were vote by mail. Or if they had places where you could go, there were very few of them. Now they've had several months to work that through, and many states are promoting vote by mail only, which opens the door for more fraud, which means they can control the election. And everybody knows it's been this way for a long time, but especially last election and this election, there is such a huge distinction in this election between what people believe and what's going to happen in the future of our country based on who we vote for. So there's the potential for voter fraud after COVID is huge. Something to watch for. Then you have, back here a little bit. We're talking about voter by fraud. The last thing, the Twitter breach. This is something I didn't bring up, but Twitter was just breached in the last week or so. And if that company can be breached, and people were sending out Twitters on different major people's accounts that weren't accurate because they breached it. If they can breach Twitter, if they can breach our United States government, if they can get the information that they can, why can't they breach a voter registration? Not only registration, but the voting machines. Because we vote by paper, but most places vote by machine. Why can't they do that? Of course they can. The potential is there for voter fraud. Then you look at the increase in birth pangs. We've talked before from Matthew 24, Jesus' words in the Olivet Discourse. Let me repeat them to you so you know that we're reading Jesus' words. Again, in Matthew 24, starting in verse, let's get it here. We're going to start on this discussion in verse 5. It says, many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will mislead many. And you'll be hearing of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not frightened, for those things must take place, but this is not yet the end. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And in various places there will be famines and pestilence, according to Luke and King James Version, and then earthquakes. He said, but all these are merely the beginning of birth pangs. Now there's two views on that, and one is that what I've just described are the first few horses of the apocalypse in Revelation. But it also could be an overview of what we're seeing in the days preceding tribulation. So those birth pangs, which that's how I've interpreted it, but it could be either way, but those birth pangs mean that once they start, they're going to continue to get worse, more intense, and more of them as we go along until Christ returns. So pestilence. In the past, 300 new diseases since 1940. 75% of them come from animals, which is kind of interesting, with all that the people in the Asian areas eat animals that we don't normally eat. We talked about locust infestation. It happened in Africa, but just during the time of COVID, it happened in Argentina and was moving over to Brazil. And it's huge. I mean, they can consume in one day what half of Omaha eats in one day. Amazing if you've ever seen that. These are just the things that have happened during COVID. And these are unique. I'm not just picking out things that happen all the time. There was a dust plume from the Sahara Desert. We saw that because it came over, and Jackie and I were noticing when we were doing a radio show that it was hurting our voice when it was here. From the Sahara Desert in Africa. And it said, some experts said it's the most significant event in the past 50 years. I never heard that, not on the TV or radio or anything. I just heard it was coming. A Russian town in the Arctic Circle reached 100.4 Fahrenheit. Their average temperature, I think actually that was on June 20th. I think their highest temperature before that was 62 or 64. The Arctic Circle, folks. That global warming people must have loved that. China's Three Gorges Dam, which is the largest dam in the world, almost collapsed because of all the rain. The worst flooding in 70 years, and that was in June, and it hasn't stopped. Right now, China and India and Nepal are having the worst flooding that they've had in so many hundreds of years they can't even count it. And I don't remember if I put down here how many died, but there's a 1 in 500 year storm that cut the north off from the south of the country in New Zealand just this last few weeks. The heaviest rainfall since at least 1790 this was this week, that caused an apocalyptic kind of a scene in Palermo, Sicily. And then I mentioned the floods. 4 million people, I said displaced, 4 million people in India and Nepal. 4 million people. That's like all of Orange County in California. I mean, that's a huge amount. That's Nebraska and Iowa and South Dakota put together. That's how many people were displaced. Record-breaking catastrophic rainfalls, again, in Japan as well as China. This has just been happening in the last month, folks. We don't see this kind of stuff, but we're seeing it now all over the world. And then this gets me. On June 20, this doesn't have to do with pestilence, but on June 29th, just not long ago, the mayor of Somerville, Massachusetts, signed a bill to legalize polyamorous relationships. In other words, polygamy. Not necessarily marrying each other, but making it legal that you can have 3 or more in a group. Really? Now, when we go back to the days of when people said, well, why shouldn't gays and lesbians be able to have relationships if they love each other? Way back then, we knew it would go down a slippery slope, but we never thought it would get to this. And it has. I mean, if that's a bill that a mayor signs in one state, it's going to happen in more. So that's the increase in birth pangs with that. Then we have the increase in famines and earthquakes. Well, famines are nothing unusual. We've always had them. Jesus said, the poor you will have with you always. 45 famines in the past 100 years. Dictators are responsible for most of the deaths because they wanted whatever it is they wanted. In China and Russia primarily, between 20 and 62, 70 million deaths by starvation. But here's a key for COVID. What's happened now is the United Nations said the world is facing multiple famines of what? Biblical proportions. COVID will push 130 million more people on the brink of starvation. So, biblical proportions of the famines caused by COVID. Then we have earthquakes. You know that between 1991 and 2005, the frequency has increased 88%. And some people will say, well, we didn't have good recording back then. Yes, we have. We've had great recording for the Richter scale for decades. And even before that, they had an antiquated way of checking earthquakes. But anyway, it's increased 88%. 2,267 earthquakes in California and Nevada in 1 week in June. Now, see, you're from California. You know you have earthquakes all the time. You read the newspaper and it'll tell you how many hundreds you have every week. But that's hundreds. It's not 2,200. You look at it. Did you even hear about the earthquake, the 5.8 earthquake that took place in California just a few weeks ago? I mean, every time one happens, they say, watch out, the big one's coming. Well, it's just like Jesus returning. Someday Jesus is going to return. And someday there's going to be a big one in California. And it may be in our lifetimes, it may not. But the point is, we can't take anything for granted. Earthquakes are increasing in numbers and intensity like never before. Famines are increasing like never before. People will say, well, it's because we have so many people on the face of the earth. Yeah, you're right. But do you think the number of people on the earth fooled Jesus? No. Do we have enough food to provide for all the people on the earth? Yes, we do. Maybe we don't now with COVID because so much has been pulled back and factories have shut down. But we got more than enough food to provide for everybody in the world. So this is something that's going to continue until Jesus returns. those two main things, as well as pestilence, are all things that have happened since COVID came about. Now here's the next three that we're going to talk about are the big ones. These are really big because the New World Order or the global government must develop before Jesus Christ returns. And I'll give you a couple verses as to why. In Daniel 2:40, in Daniel 2, you may recall Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. It was a dream of a statue. Now Daniel interpreted the dream without even knowing what the dream was. So he told the king what the dream was, and he interpreted. And he said, "You, O king, are the head of gold. And then there's a chest of silver, bronze, belly, and legs of iron, and feet of iron and clay. And these are the different world kingdoms that are going to take place, understandably, against Israel. So I think, dealing with who will control Israel. But these are the world kingdoms that are going to be on the stage. So when you get to the end of that discussion, he mentions feet and toes. So he says, in that you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it will be a divided kingdom. So this last kingdom, see, we can prove historically that Babylon, the head of gold, was a country that ruled the world at that time and conquered Israel. Then the breast of silver was the Medes and the Persians. They also conquered Israel. The thighs of bronze were Greece, and then the legs were Rome. And if you know anything about the history of Rome, that makes perfect sense because Rome was divided. Rome was divided into the east and the west. It was actually, they divided it themselves. They made a decision to divide it because it was so large they couldn't handle it. So one capital was in Rome and one was in Constantinople. So it was the feet of iron, the legs of iron. So we know historically all of those kingdoms have been world-dominating kingdoms. Now, when I say world-dominating kingdoms, did they dominate the United States? No, because we weren't founded. But they dominated the known world at that time, the major part of the known world at that time. So there's this last kingdom, though, that's going to come up, that's the feet of iron and clay. How many toes do 2 feet have? 10. So that number 10 is significant. So this last kingdom is going to be made partly of iron, the toughness of iron, inasmuch as you saw the iron mixed with common clay. As the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of pottery, so some of the kingdom will be strong and some of it brittle. If you know the history of the Roman Empire, when they divided up, you had the west part was Europe and the east part was what we know today as the Middle East. So if this kingdom is coming back and you see part of it strong, well, that would tend to be the Roman kingdom, which was of the West European side, which would be strong. And then the more brittle part could be the Middle East because it's very brittle these days. It could be the Muslim sector. So you could somehow have them come together in this last kingdom. But however it's going to play out, we know that there's 10 toes. Keep the 10 in mind. And we know that this kingdom is coming about us. Now it tells us in the days of those kings, see, kings, multiple kings. Every other nation had one king at a time. This has multiple kings. The God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed, and that kingdom will not be left for another people. It will crush and put an end to all these kingdoms, but it itself will endure forever. Whose kingdom is that? Jesus Christ. So we know that there's coming a world kingdom that we have not seen historically. There's been no world kingdom since the Roman Empire. So there's coming a kingdom, and during that kingdom that's going to have 10 kings, because it says multiple kings there and it's got 10 toes, that during that kingdom, that's when Jesus Christ is going to return. So we know before Jesus returns, there's going to be a one world government again, a government that controls the whole world. Revelation 17:12-14 explains those 10 horns that we see. Both Satan and the Antichrist have horns. And so when it talks about 10, it says, the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. Who's the beast? The Antichrist. We'll talk about him in a little while. There's a one world leader. If you're going to have a one world government, you have to have a one world leader. He's called the beast in Revelation 13, but we call him the Antichrist. So he's going to be the head of it, but he's going to have 10 kings who receive a kingdom, who are going to work with him. These have one purpose, and they give their power and authority to the beast. So the 10 kingdoms that we're going to have in these last days, which are the 10 toes, which are the 10 horns, are going to be 10 kings who give their power to the Antichrist. Oh, that'll never happen. How will the world ever divide up into 10 kingdoms? Or how can you have 10 kings from Europe or anything else that will be in charge of the whole world? It's already happening. In 2009, this map is from 2009. I don't know that you can find it anymore, but I got this off the United Nations website way back then. It was called the United Nations Millennial Development Goals Report of 2009. They have since changed all of that to call them the Sustainable Development Plan for 2030. And we'll get to that in a minute. Can you count on the left side, if you can't count the colors on the right, how many areas are broken down there? 10. 10 areas. The United Nations is proposing, did then and still proposes, that we break the world into 10 different regions so that those regions can work together towards a sustainable development. And we're North America. Now, you probably can't see the color too much, but North America as well as Australia, we're together in color. So basically you have the Western powers, besides Europe and stuff. We're one entity. So we would be one king. Well, you say, that'll never happen. The United States is too powerful. We've already gone through the financial loss that we have experienced through COVID. Who would have thought, as prosperous as this nation has always been, but became under President Trump, who would have thought we'd be in the situation we are now? And if more and more states close down like they're starting to, cities and states, we're going to go back into something that's so much worse than we could ever have imagined. If we continue to fall financially, if President Trump, who is a Make America Great person, loses, we're going to have Joe Biden, who supports these goals, who supports the one world government, who supports the socialistic agenda, and who also, if you're familiar with it, has agreed to virtually every principle that he was given by Bernie Sanders in his platform, in Biden's platform. Maybe we'll talk about that another time. Certainly Jackie and I will do a radio show on it. But so all of Bernie Sanders, communistic, progressive, he's not really a Democrat, he's a socialist. And a socialist is a really nice name for communist. And so that's Bernie Sanders. So his agenda is a communist agenda, and Joe Biden has just accepted it in order to get the votes of the people who support Bernie Sanders. If he gets in, he and his cronies, the people he has worked with, support this agenda. So that means that we could fall right into it any day, into a one world government. Now let's look at these sustainable development goals. They all really sound good. I'm not going to read every one of them, but they all really sound good. The first one's no poverty. No poverty. Then you have zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education. Number 5, gender equality. Now, forget us, forget a lot of the countries in the world, but we're going to see in a little while that there's 50 plus countries in this world that are predominantly Muslim. They do not support gender equality. How are they going to support that agenda? Are they going to compromise, or are they just going to poo-poo it? Or will they be out of the picture? One doesn't know, but these are the goals. And now you tell me, how is it possible to have zero hunger, no poverty, health for everyone, quality education? This is the United Nations, folks. We're talking about the whole world. How is it possible for that to happen? Yeah, she said it very succinctly. Redistribution of wealth. Take all the money from the rich countries and hand it out to the poor. Now, if you look right now at the money that we give to the United Nations and the World Health Organization and all these other countries, and not for long, unless Joe Biden gets in, then they'll give it back to the World Health Organization. But we're already providing a ton of money to these places. But that's not enough, because we're the wealthiest nation in the world, and we have to provide percentage-wise based on how wealthy we are, is basically what's happening. But if you look at the people who supported NATO, you recall when President Trump came in, He wanted to cut that budget because we were providing so much, and France and England weren't providing hardly anything. They were providing a small percentage, but they weren't even paying that small percentage. So we were providing the most of it. It's redistribution of wealth all across the world. So you work your tail off to make $50,000 a year, and the guy who doesn't work at all gets $25,000 of your money. I mean, that's being very simplistic. But you get the idea? Now tell me something else. What's your motivation to work hard if you're going to have to give away all your money? In 2010, when we were in Italy, we were told that they were taxed 70%. We said, 70%? How is that even possible? Do you have any idea how much we're taxed? We are right there. Now, it may not be on your federal taxes. Well, you're an accountant, you know. So what would it be? Yeah, you've got your federal tax, your state tax, your property tax, your sales tax, state tax, I don't remember which one I said twice. And then you look at your phone bill. 1/3 of that are taxes. Or, you know, we never used to have a $15 or $30 sewer fee. That's what they call it. Well, that's a tax. So we're getting near 70% of what we make goes to the government. How are we going to continue to pay for all the other people? And what's going to happen after COVID? You see, what we're having and what we're seeing as we go through is the call for the one world government. Every president, you know, I have quotes from every president. Actually, it goes up to H.W. Bush, I think. I might have one through W. Bush. Every president for the past 100 years has supported a new world order. Why? What? But that's what they've been working for. Why do you suppose George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush and a lot of their cronies did not support Donald Trump, the Republican nominee for president? Because he doesn't go along with these goals. He doesn't agree with them. And as much as you may, if you're Republican, you may have loved either of the Bushes. If you're Democrat, you may have loved Obama. It doesn't matter. They both have the same goals. How could these President Bushes support Hillary Clinton for president over a Republican? Because they all have the same agenda, folks. It's the same. On paper, it may look different, but it's the same agenda behind the scenes. After 9/11, we willingly gave up government control of our privacy. We said, please protect us. Here's the Patriot Act. It's taken away our privacy. We have 50 million cameras in this country. What are they doing? They're not just watching traffic patterns. Of course, we have satellites, and we know what they can track. They track our location. If the first person that got COVID in Nebraska, they went back and tracked every single thing she did. And they did that for a long time until they realized it was a little out of hand. But they have the ability right now to track us as a government for COVID. So we just keep giving them this government subjugation. And that's all part of the New World Order, because you see, they have to subjugate us. The other thing they're going to have to do is take away our guns. So you just watch to see what happens in the near future, and see what happens with this couple in St. Louis, because we won't give up easily. We are fighters in this country. We won't give up easily. Our smartphones, TVs, Alexa, Facebook, they all monitor our movements. And a lot of them are controlling our movements. Facebook, Twitter, things like that. Our mobile phones, in South Korea, they have tracking devices on their phones, so they can find out who has COVID, who's close to the next person in COVID. And we talked about that here, and you said we've already got that on our Apple phones. It's there. The control, the tracking, the need. The key, though, is the need. I can't remember who said it, but somebody once said, you don't let a good catastrophe go to waste. And it wasn't the mayor of Chicago. He said it too, but he's not the first one to say it. The progressives, the communists, never let a good catastrophe go to waste. They use it just to kick the can down a little bit further down the road. And that's what they're doing with this. Another part, this is pretty interesting. A Vatican document called for the gradual creation of a world political authority. Do you see an oxymoron there? The Vatican is a Catholic religious entity. What are they doing calling for a world political authority? Do you know why they're doing that? Because they completely support the Sustainable Development Goals, which are communist goals, which are desired for the world government, and I don't know if the Vatican supports it, but the current Pope supports it. And if he supports it, the Vatican supports it. So they called for a gradual creation of this with broad powers to regulate financial markets, and rein in the inequities and distortions of capitalistic development. So what does that sound like? Communism. And of course, well, it says, due to quote, selfish collective greed and the hoarding of goods on a great scale. Have you ever been to the Vatican? How many have been to the Vatican? Is it this poor little clay house? They have so many zillions. Isn't that the last one after trillions? They have so many zillions of dollars worth of artwork and wealth. And they're calling for equity? Something's missing in that, except that the current pope really supports the socialistic agenda. And then they're calling for a supranational authority. That's another name for a one world government. It said it is needed to place the common good, remember that phrase, at the center of the international economic activity. So they're calling for a one world government, and they're calling for redistribution of wealth, and they're a religious organization who are very wealthy. Wonder if they're going to sell all their paintings and their murals and everything they have, and their churches and their land. That's what redistribution of wealth is. But you see, the fact is, redistribution of wealth is, if I'm the powerful, I'm not redistributing my wealth. It's everybody else that's got to do it. So the people in power, you look at Russia, you look at the Palestinians. When Yasser Arafat died, he had stuck away $5 million of money that should have been going to his people. But he confiscated it, used it for himself. No way was he, well, I shouldn't say that, but in no way did his job merit the raising of $5 million for his job, plus whatever he spent at that time. But the same thing goes with other things. The rich get richer, and then there's the rest of us. In 2010, and this talks about how Greece needed $110 billion bailout. And so where did they go? The European Union, and they got bailed out. But it's not just them. You look at Italy. The Greek debt was 178% of its gross domestic product. Italy's debt was 137% of their gross domestic product. How are you ever going to pay that back? And by the way, how are you ever going to get to the point where it's even, let alone minus? And even if you're even, that's your debt. You've got to run your country. So these European countries are going bankrupt. They're getting bailed out by the European Union. What's going to happen with COVID? Who knows? They could all go under. But the fact is, the European Union can't keep bailing them out. That's just another political entity that is taking the money, sometimes giving it back as people need it. But they're talking about the only way out is a share the debt, redistribution of wealth, maybe a United States of Europe or world government. I mean, they have the European Union right now, but maybe they're looking at even something bigger. If you read Daniel 9, it gives us the impression that the world government might be the European Union, or something that encompasses Europe, because of the Roman Empire was the legs of the statue. And so that's possible, that may happen. But the point is, we have these Western culture countries that are going way into debt. We were in Greece in 2016, and most of the people who were there will tell you they were really surprised because it just was dirty, and the people were great, but the place itself was dirty and depressing, and it just, you think of Greece as romantic and Athens as this great place. It really isn't anymore. Greek islands are beautiful, but that's another story. Gordon Brown, who's the former Prime Minister of Great Britain, said he called for a global government to tackle the COVID problem. Now, he came out publicly. There's other people who've come out publicly, too, who are world leaders or former world leaders. Lots of them. This is the time, they say. The World Health Organization. On July 6th, President Trump said he was not going to fund it anymore because of all the misinformation that they provided about COVID. But that doesn't take place for another year. So if Biden gets in, and who do you suppose is going to support Biden? All the people who support the World Health Organization are going to support him, because if he gets in, he's going to reinstate that money to them. And I'm not going to go through everything they did. They may have some good points, but they sure made a lot of mistakes with COVID. But the point here is, we've already got a World Health Organization. We've already got a world court. We've already got international travel. So we're dependent on each other. I don't remember how many months ago it was, but when the China stock market caved, and overnight our stock market plummeted because the China market did. We're interdependent on each other already worldwide. So we're right there, folks. Right there. And maybe COVID is what it's going to take us into a one world government. Oh, yeah. He said that in Greece, they made a decision that they could take your money out of your bank account to bail them out. And President Obama signed a similar order when he was in office. By the way, I talked to a president of a bank this weekend, and I asked him about the cashless society, because we talked about that last week with the Mark of the Beast. And I said, do you think the cashless society is going to come? Well, let me backtrack. Do you know that our banks are having a problem with coins right now? They're asking people, and if you go into a store, a lot of times they'll ask for a credit card because they don't have coins to give you back. Well, what does that lead us to? And the main reason is because the Mint's not printing coins, and people save coins and dollars and stuff, so they don't have enough. So that's just another avenue towards a cashless society. But I said to the banker, I said, what do you think is going to happen with this cashless society? And he said everybody loves cash. People like to give away cash, birthday gifts and all, save it and for special things. He said people aren't going to give up the cash. And I said, I know we're not. But what about the government? What if the government forces us to do a credit card? And he told me, which you probably already know, is that they now have a credit card that you just scan. It's not a chip. You just scan it. So you don't have to touch anything at all. And you never have to give it to somebody. Anyway, he told me that's going on. But as we talked a little bit more about the cashless society, he said, I don't see it ever happening. So I told him some things we talked about last week, and he said, you know more about this than I do. Because, he's a banker. He's doing banking things. Even though he follows prophecy, he just isn't something he ever thought would happen. So we got a lot of things going on. We're moving towards this new world order faster than we could ever imagine. So let's talk about the World Economic Forum. So they met on June 3rd, and I told you who all was there. And fascinating. We couldn't travel. We can't go to different countries, can we? But they all went. They all had private jets, so they could do that. But they were able to get in the countries, and we couldn't get in there. Rich and powerful can do a lot of things. They called upon the nations to use the coronavirus crisis to reset every aspect of society: government, education, working conditions, and income. What have we seen in our country? A reset of society. They're trying to change the government. They certainly are changing it in many of the cities where all this lawlessness is going on. The education system, they're not letting our kids go to school. You look at and by the way, if you've heard from the Pediatric Association, they say that kids are safe from this. Kids are very unlikely to get this. Now, certainly anybody can get it, but they're very unlikely to get it. Teachers might get it, but the kids are unlikely to get it. They closed down schools after they opened them in Israel because teachers got it, but the kids never got it. Now they've reopened again because the kids aren't getting it. But anyway, education, working conditions. Not only do we not have work, but those of us who do have work, they're controlling it. They're controlling when you can be open, what you have to do, what you have to do to keep it clean, and they're monitoring it. If they find out that you're not following the rules, they'll close you down. And income, well, lots of people, how many millions of people are on unemployment right now? So what they said in June is already happening. And then you have the same group who also asked world leaders to do three things. Now, keep in mind who was there. The head of the European Union, the head of the United Nations, Prince Charles, several heads of major non-government organizations as well as government organizations, said, make the stock market more fair. That's like having every kid on a football team with the most valuable player. You that doesn't make sense. But make it more fair, more equitable. Use investments, global taxes, which is what investments are, to advance global goals. There you have the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And 3, support the public good or the common good, a phrase that Pope Francis uses instead of the world government. So the common good, the public good, those are synonyms for a one world government or world order. And then the International Criminal Court, we've refused, and Israel has too, to recognize it, but all the other countries do. Not all, but most of them recognize it. And now they're coming against us for war crimes. Again, in the United States, certainly they always go against Israel, but for war crimes. So on June 11th, President Trump blocked the world court officials and their families from entering the United States and having access to their property in the United States because they're trying to take us to the world court. If our country changes and we move down that slope, we're susceptible for war crimes. Well, that could be huge, huh? Because we're involved in 153 countries, I think it is, that we have military in. And you know that there have been mistakes in every one of those countries. So we could really be in trouble. And if we're taken to court and we lose, we'll have to pay fines, and another way that the United States is taken down. Well, if we, as I said, if we have a one world government, we have to have a one world leader. In Revelation 13, 1 through 6, this is the best passage that describes him. I didn't put the whole passage up there. I just put major portions of it. But there's places in Daniel that we see about it, Daniel 11, Daniel 7. We see places about in other parts of Revelation, in Thessalonians and other books in the Bible. It says, "Then I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads." That's that 10 horns. And the beast is his name. We call him the Antichrist. He's never called that in Scripture. He's called the beast, the man of lawlessness, the son of destruction. He's got lots of names, but Antichrist simply is a name that comes out of the book of 1st and 2nd John that indicates it's somebody who goes against the truth of God. So we call him the Antichrist. So it says here, on his horns were 10 diadems. There are 2 words in the Greek for diadems, or for crowns. One is diadem, one is Stephanos. Stephanos is a victor's crown. A diadem is a kingly crown. There's only 3 people in Scripture who wear a kingly crown. One is the beast, one is Satan, and ultimately it's going to be Jesus Christ. So this one has, he's got a diadem because it says the dragon gave him power and his throne and great authority. And the whole earth was amazed and followed after the beast. They worshiped the dragon. They're going to be worshiping Satan because he gave his authority to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast and who is able to wage war with him?" And then there was given to him a mouth speaking arrogant words and blasphemies, and authority to act for 42 months was given him. Book of Revelation is full of synonyms to that. 42 months, 1,260 days, 3.5 years, times, and half a times, that all indicate 3.5 years. So he has authority for 3.5 years. That's the middle of the tribulation forward. And he opened his mouth to blaspheme God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, that is, those who dwell in heaven. It was also given to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority over every tribe and people and tongue and nation was given to him. Now the saints here are the Jews, and the tribes and tongues and peoples and nations are the Gentiles. So he has authority to make war over everybody on the earth. And it goes on in verse 8, "All who dwell on the earth will worship him, everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain." This is halfway through the tribulation. It's going to be hell on earth. Now, the Antichrist is empowered by Satan halfway through the tribulation. He will take over at the beginning of the tribulation, because what starts the tribulation period, I believe, according to Scripture, is Daniel 9:27. And it says, he, which is the Antichrist, will make a firm covenant with the many. And that's a covenant of imposed authority over Israel. Those are the many. And he's going to make it for 7 years. Book of Revelation is 7 years long. Well, the tribulation period of it is from chapter 6 to chapter 19. 7 years long. And in the middle of the tribulation, he's going to stop the sacrifice and the grain offerings, and on the wing of abomination will come one who makes desolate. He's going to set up the abomination of desolation in the temple. So that tells us the timing. First 3.5 years, he's in charge. But in the middle of the tribulation, he's going to be empowered by Satan, and from that time forward, he declares himself to be God. That's when the mark of the beast happens. That's when people will have to worship him. So we have a new world leader that will have to be in charge. Who is he? Is that even possible? Well, I am not saying that it's France's president, Macron, but I'm just giving you this as an example. Let me share with you Daniel 7:23 and 25. It says, the fourth beast will be a fourth kingdom on the earth, which will be different from all the other kingdoms and would devour the whole earth and tread it down and crush it. As for the 10 horns, out of the kingdom 10 kings will arise. We saw that in Revelation 17, also. And another will arise after him, and he will be different from the previous ones and will subdue 3 kings. We're talking about the Antichrist there. So he's going to start out with 10, but then he's going to get rid of 3, and then he's going to take over. He will speak out against the Most High, saw that in Revelation 13, and wear down the saints of the Highest One. And he will intend to make alterations in time and in law, and they will be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. That's 3.5 years. He's going to make changes in time and law. A lot of people think he'll be a Muslim because the Muslims have their own calendar. So he would impose on us the Muslim calendar. Maybe, maybe not. A lot of people, Chinese have their own calendar, Jews have their own calendar. But he's going to make changes in law. If he's a Muslim, he's going to impose Sharia law on the United States and the world, if he's a Muslim. But whoever it is, you just look at the laws. Look at what's happening now. I mean, right now, our president can write an executive order, and that becomes rule, becomes law, even though it's not legally a law. We've got our Supreme Court writing laws. They're not supposed to write law. They're supposed to judge. But anyway, that's what's going to happen with him. Now, there are 3 statements up there where basically they're saying France's Macron, President Emmanuel Macron, is positioning himself as leader of the world. That was an article. And it's not just that article. There were several others. Now, do I think he's the Antichrist? No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that there are people out there who are already positioning themselves for that world leadership. And I believe Jesus is coming soon, so I think the Antichrist is on the scene. We just don't know who he is. He's coming, though. And then you have a one-world religious system. This is where the Catholic Church comes in with the way they're pushing for unity and ecumenicalism. The groundwork's already been laid in the past. The World Council of Churches was established in 1948, and that included 349 Protestant religions, but it didn't include the Catholic Church. Well, lately the Catholic Church has been working with them. So when the recent president his term was over and he resigned. When he had been working with the Vatican, and the Vatican had been working with him so well that he said, one of the things he's proudest of is the practical ecumenism pursued together with Pope Francis. Pope Francis' message is, we cannot separate theology from the work for peace, the care of God's creation, to deal with the situation of the poor and the migrants. Now, that sounds like the social gospel. The Vatican's working with the World Council of Churches to develop this sustainable development program, but also to get their religious cooperation in this ecumenism. Interesting. The past pope wasn't able to do that. No other pope before it has been able to do it. But Pope Francis is a, what is he? Jesuit. Thank you. He's a Jesuit. They're much more liberal, much more socialistic conscience. If you ever went to Creighton, which I did, you know what their philosophy is, and you know that they're just more liberal. And that's how Pope Francis is. But he's a peacemaker on one hand, where he's working with all these people, but he's also working toward ecumenicalism, and that brings all the nations to the world together. Now, Olav Tevet, I told you that. The World Council of Churches sent a letter to the EU in June asking it to punish Israel if Israel annexes part of Judea and Samaria. Now, that's another thing that we're not even talking about, but during this COVID, anti-Semitism has risen to huge proportions because the people who don't like Israel are blaming Israel for COVID. Poor Israel, they get blamed for everything. But they're doing it. So anti-Semitism has risen significantly. A diverse group of global religious leaders, this is important, including Pope Francis and the Dalai Lama, met at The Hague in the Netherlands in 2017 to appeal for religious fellowship and unity. Now look at this. In a video in 2016, Pope Francis said all the major religions are different paths to the same God. That is not right. Not right. Hinduism, Buddhism, which are the third and fourth largest religions in the world, Islam, the second largest, we have nothing in common because none of them believe in the gospel message of Jesus Christ. So we can all have the same paths, different paths to the same God. Pope Francis has been quoted as saying, we all believe in the same God, there is no hell, and Jesus was not a man. Those are things he's been quoted as saying during the time that he's been Pope. Now, I'm sure that what he was promoting was the fact that Jesus is God. But he said he's not man. He also said he doesn't believe there's a hell. A lot of people believe that everybody's just eventually going to go to heaven. That's not what Scripture says, though. And certainly, we don't all believe in the same God. The Economy of Francis Economic Conference was held right at the beginning of COVID. And it called for concerns of the environment which urgently demand a sound economy and a sustainable development that can heal its wounds and assure us of a worthy future. This is the largest religious denomination in the world. Why are they talking about the economy? Why aren't they talking about a relationship with Jesus Christ and the need for people to know Jesus and the gospel message of Jesus Christ? Because that's the only thing that's going to save us. It's not sustainable development. It's not a cohesive world. It's not a sound economy. It's Jesus Christ. And yet we don't hear that. We hear socialistic unity within the Vatican. And I don't mean to pick on the Pope or the Catholic Church. I'm just sharing because it's the largest religion in the world. And if they're going towards ecumenicalism and away from the gospel message, you can imagine how the rest of us are going. On May 14th, again during COVID, Pope Francis, he was to have hosted the Reinventing the Global Education Alliance. So now we can add education to the economy and the global government and sustainable development. Instead, it's been moved back to October. It's an alliance between the Earth's inhabitants for our common home, which we are bound to care for and respect. I don't disagree with that. As he said, an alliance that generates peace, justice, and hospitality among all peoples of the human family, as well as dialogue between religions. So that's kind of thrown in there in the background. Nowhere in the gospel of Jesus Christ does it throw the gospel in the background. If you are a leader of a religious movement, you should be promoting your movement. You see the Muslim promoting Allah and Muhammad, but you don't see the Pope talking that much about Jesus Christ. He talks a lot about the church, but not about Jesus Christ. And he's just an example. We see that all throughout mainline Protestant denominations too. But the point is that this particular Pope is pushing for ecumenicalism more than anybody else has. And he's also pushing for the world's global sustainable development goals. So wouldn't it be easy for the Catholic Church, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, but for the Catholic Church to bring everybody together under peaceful common goals of social justice as a world religious entity, and then you have the Antichrist, a global government entity. This is the woman riding the beast in Revelation 17. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be the Catholic Church. A lot of people have thought that for centuries. Could be Islam, could be any conglomeration. But you see how it's working together. If this Pope dies, the next Pope might have different opinions. But you see how it's all working together for that one world religion. And here's a statistic to show you the largest religions. But the key is you've got 50 countries that are predominantly Muslim. You only have 19 countries that are predominantly Christian. And 6 countries have 30% or more Muslims. So you have 56 countries that in the next 10 or 15, maybe 20 years are going to be predominantly Muslim. And you have maybe 32 that will be predominantly Christian. The world is shifting. It wasn't like that before. But we're shifting. We're going away from our Christianity. And Islam's becoming the fastest growing religion. I was surprised Hinduism and Buddhism because we don't hear about those. We don't have a lot of Hindus here in the United States or Buddhists in the United States. But they sure do over in India and that area. Now let's talk briefly. You're not going to be surprised, but we're going to run out of time. So you know what? I'm not even going to get into this because it's just too good. We've got so much to talk about Gog and Magog that then moves into Turkey, that then moves into Iran. So we will come back next week, a 4th week, and we will finish up this, and then we'll talk about racism. And if we can't get the full discussion of that in, then we'll go on to another week. And then we'll start Romans whenever we start Romans. But this is the stuff that the Bible says is going to happen. before Jesus comes. No other generation has been able to see a lot of these things like we are. In James chapter 5, it tells us, I want to read it exactly, because I hadn't told you about this, but when we're talking about wealth, it talks about it right here in James 5, when it says, verse 3, your gold and your silver have rusted, and the rust will be a witness against you, and will consume your flesh like fire. It is in the last days that you have stored up your treasure. We have more wealth in this world than we could ever have imagined. And we in the United States have more than, again, anybody else has. In the last days, we will have stored up our treasures. That's just another sign of what we're seeing. And what's God taking out of our hands right now? Our treasures. Because he knows that's what our God is. Is God allowing COVID here to punish us? I wouldn't say that. It could be, because he does bring adversity to punish people. He did in the Old Testament, but that's only because they finally turned away from him and there was no turning back. But God always uses adversity to get our attention. Whether it's finances, whether it's health, whatever the problem is, he always uses to get our attention. And folks, what we're seeing today, we might weather this through and be fine next year. Or we might find ourselves in a whole different world next year. One thing is for certain, we will never be the same. We are moving far closer and closer to the fulfillment of Bible prophecy and the return of Jesus Christ. No other generation has seen so many prophecies fulfilled as this one, except those who are alive at the first coming of Christ. No other generation. You could say, well, there's been famines and there's been earthquakes. Yeah, but not to this intensity. Well, there's been world governments. Well, not since the time of Rome. There's been world leaders, and not since the time of Rome. So these things, it's been thousands of years since we've seen some of these things be a possibility. And we're living in the time where it could happen tomorrow. I mean, who would have thought that 4 months ago we'd be in the situation that we're in now, and we're not even over. We're looking at what could happen down the road. Now, I don't tell you these things to scare you, because God does not give us a spirit of fear, but of power to overcome fear and love and sound mind. That's what he gives us. God is our strength and our Redeemer. He's the one we hope for. Our hope needs to be in him. If we let fear take over, then we will fall and spiritually, but we will also subjugate ourselves to those who will take care of our fear. Jesus was a real activist when it came to standing up for truth. And that's what we need to stand up for. We need to be willing to stand up for the truth of God, the Word of God, and for Jesus Christ when the world tells us we can't do that anymore. Are you willing to do that? Let's pray. Father, the answer to all of this, whatever we've been talking about, is Jesus Christ. We need Jesus individually and then corporately as a country and as a world. That's the only answer. The hope that we have in Jesus Christ for our day-to-day life and the future of eternity with Jesus is the only answer. God, I pray that you would move in our hearts to show us a need for Jesus in a new way, to cause us to fast and pray and seek your face and turn from our wicked ways. Oh God, we need to have a personal revival, and then we need to have that corporate one that will come later after we do. I pray that you will bring us to our knees, God, and I know that that means maybe harder times ahead, but it's much more important that we walk with you than we have the comforts that we have today. So, God, whatever you need to do it in our lives so that we will walk with you. Walk in a manner worthy of you, to please you in all respects, bearing fruit in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of God. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.